Russell as I was walking over here. They're like, what are you about to do? I was like, I'm going to go talk to the next gen. I said, I'm nervous. They were like, why are you nervous? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I can't remember the last time. I haven't taught in front of a group outside of my team in a long time. So you guys are a little bit of guinea pigs for my back from retirement. But I just thought, I don't know a lot of you. I've had limited interaction with most of you, honestly. So, Tim said, Cherish, Che. I can share the origin of that nickname at a later time. But I started attending Elevation in 2008. I was baptized here. I think we have a picture of my baptism. There's LB baptizing me 2008. We did spontaneous baptisms that weekend. It was called Awakening. And I've really been a part of the church ever since then. So it's been about 15 years. Before that, I managed hair salons, so something totally unrelated to ministry. But I came on staff in 2010. I was hired as a project manager in creative, doing video project management, producing. We didn't have the luxury of having producers and project managers back then. So that was what I did. And then we've got a picture here. This is me and my, I'm running audio for the 5-year documentary. This is how we changed the world. I don't think we used any of that audio. But we did not have an audio engineer back then, so it was whoever could go. But I did project management for several years. I built a team of PMs. Shout out to Ashley Hollingsworth, Bailey Trotter, and Kelly Draddy. They're all still here. But I've been on this journey for the last 13 years of ministry. My role, my responsibilities have always evolved. And I'm going to talk about some of those specifics. But if you haven't noticed yet, you will, that you need to get used to change at Elevation Church. And so I think today I just want to talk to you about how to navigate that, how to get comfortable with it, and specifically change within your role and your responsibilities. Let me see. Yeah, I think one of the most valuable things I learned is what do I do when change happens, and then how do I respond to it? So this is something I've probably gotten better at through the years, but I don't think that I've mastered it. I think I know when to recognize it, and so I just hope to give you some tools that took me maybe 10 years and to learn that maybe you could learn a little sooner than I did. This is going to be more on leadership, personal development than a biblical teaching, although I think everything that I'm about to say is biblically based. So just so you kind of have expectations. I'm not a preacher, lecturer. My idea for this is more that this is you and I sitting down to have coffee. And so I want you, as I'm speaking, if there's a question that you think of while I'm talking, just jot it down. And hopefully, as long as I don't ramble, we should have time at the end to get some questions. Or if you just want to know, what's my favorite Biggie song or whatever, you can ask me that too. So I want to talk about receive, steward, and release. Receive, steward, and release. I'm going to break those down, but I've had to get really good at knowing when to receive and then knowing when to release, whether that's a project or people or responsibilities or opportunities. So I'm going to pray for us, and then I'll jump into those 3 points. So God, I just pray that you would speak through me now, that you would make it clear. I pray that even if it's just one small thing, that every person in this room would have something that you would challenge them with, that you would encourage them with, or something to think on and pray on for themselves, Lord. So we love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so receive. So when I say receive, you could also think of catch. Football season, right? I just mean there are a lot of things that God gives us access to, right? We know we have love, we have grace, we have strength, but I'm not talking about those kind of things. I'm talking about receiving opportunity or receiving responsibility or a specific project, or it could be a person. And we get to choose whether we catch or receive that opportunity or if we don't. And I think that these things can be harder to receive than grace and love. It's we know we're supposed to receive those things, but sometimes when it's an opportunity presented to us, it's am I supposed to receive this? Is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to apply for a role? Am I supposed to invest in this idea or this person? We have to decide whether we catch or receive it. I think God gives us the option. So One thing that I want to mention about receiving is that our response to a new opportunity, it might look different based on our personality and based on tenure. So how many people are new, like 3 years under, 2 years under? Oh, a lot of you, okay. So you guys are usually the people who are like, give me more. I want every opportunity, I'm hungry, I'm like ready to go, give me the thing, I wanna build it. You've got the energy, and you are like ready to take the thing on. So receiving is usually easier the shorter time you've been on here. Maybe some of you have been here a little longer though, and maybe you were like what Pastor was talking about this week, where you've tried, you're like, I've tried, and I'm kind of tired. Like, I've been trying, and now I'm a little tired. And so when new opportunities or responsibilities are given to you, they might feel more like burdens. And so everybody's in a different place. If you're 8+ years, who's been on longer? Jesse, it's a couple of you. Okay. You guys, your new opportunities might feel a little scary because we're comfortable. Like, we got this. Like, we know what we're doing, and the opportunity might come, or you might feel like, man, I'm too old to learn this. Like, do I need to learn this thing? Like, but we know if we're not growing, we're dying, right? So like, we've got to take on new opportunities. So I wouldn't limit any of those feelings based on tenure. I think you can experience any of those at any point, but just know that like, you're gonna have different seasons where you might respond differently to opportunities. Throughout this conversation, I'm gonna use myself as an example. So I was given the opportunity to be the communications director at the church. It was a role that did not exist. It did not have a job description. But I was honored. I was honored to be asked, and it was scary. But for me at the time, I didn't hesitate. It was an easy opportunity to say yes to. It was like, my leaders see a gap and they want me to fill it, I'm gonna fill it. So that was an easy decision, and it was a big opportunity. And even though it was scary, I said, yes, I'm gonna do this. That one was really clear for me, but not all opportunities are that clear or feel that right. So it could be as simple, your opportunities might be a little bit smaller. Like, maybe you've been given the opportunity to lead a small group of students, and this parent comes to you and they're like, we need you to lead. And you're like, I don't have time. Like, it's your decision in that moment, am I gonna lead this? It could just be a person that is like needing your help. Like, are you gonna jump in and take on that responsibility? It could be an opportunity to lead a meeting or be in a setting like this to teach something that you've never done before. Maybe you're given that opportunity. It could just be a new project. Like, Tim's like, I got this new thing, I want you to do it. Could be a problem that you see, and you're like, I have a solution to that, but do I bring the solution? Like, God presents us with all these opportunities to grow and to challenge us, and some are big, and some are small, and some are clear, and some are not. So I'm gonna give you some questions in just a minute that'll hopefully help you navigate that. But one other thing I wanna mention about receive is that, really about new opportunities, is that sometimes new opportunities are distractions. I think the enemy would like nothing more than distract you from your calling. And that could be full vulnerability, that's been like a freelance opportunity in the past of like, oh, it looked like this would be something that might re-energize me or inspire me. And then in fact, it just drained my time and energy and wasn't worth what I put into it. Not that freelance is bad, but do it for the right reasons, like that you feel like it's an opportunity that God's providing you, not just something to make money off of, because that's not gonna be enough. But I think just be aware that the enemy likes to put new and shiny opportunities in front of you, but they're really just distractions from what you're supposed to be doing and what you're supposed to be focused on. I talked to someone recently who they were upset that they didn't get considered for a supervisor role. And I'm talking to her and I'm like, well, tell me about the things that you love about your job. So she's rattling off all of these things that she loves to do and loves about her job. And I was like, well, if you were a supervisor, you wouldn't get to do any of those things, right? And she was like, well, I guess I just wanted to be considered. And I was like, well, why is your leader, would I consider you for something that I can see you're thriving in and that you love? Like, you're not gonna love those things. You're not gonna love what it takes to be a supervisor. Like, that's not the thing that you love, and that's okay. And she finally got there and was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was like, I think even in our organization, the enemy will use that idea of supervisor as a distraction, Because it's like, oh, if I can kind of divide the team and make them bitter at somebody else or bitter at their leader, like, then like they're not focused on the thing that they should be focused on. So just don't let the enemy, pay attention. Is it a true opportunity or is it a distraction? So 3 questions that I have that I feel like if you have an opportunity in front of you is, how am I feeling about this opportunity? Am I excited? Am I anxious? Am I scared? Like, what type of feeling am I having about it? Annoyed, frustrated? Second question would be why? Why do I feel that way? Am I feeling that way because I'm frustrated that someone else didn't take on that responsibility? Am I excited because I feel like I have value to add and I feel like I could really make this better? Like, what is your why behind how you're feeling? And then, is this one for me? So I'm a problem solver by nature. So I could walk through this organization and be like, let me do that, let me do that, let me do that. And that would be bad because there are people leading all of those teams. But I sometimes need help deciding, is this a problem that I'm supposed to solve? Is it a problem that I'm supposed to help someone else solve? Or am I just supposed to be hands off? It's not always my problem. So the other thing I'll say, like, just, is this one for me? Like, you're not always gonna have complete peace every time. I'm not gonna try to pretend that you do. I honestly think if you're feeling a little scared, it probably is an opportunity that you're supposed to step into. I think that's how God works. Like, he wants it to be a little bit of a step of faith, right? So the thing that I've always leaned on is, if I'm not sure, I move towards action. So if I'm just staying stagnant on that opportunity, then it might be something that I was supposed to be given, but God gave it to somebody else because I didn't take a step forward. But always lean towards action if you're unsure, because God will always shut it down if it's not yours, right? Like, he'll shut it down. Okay, so that's the first one, receive. Second one is steward. So once we catch the opportunity, we say, yes, God, I'm gonna receive this. This is the stewardship and the management part of what we do. Like, when you're given something, you steward it well. Stewardship obviously is biblical. There's a lot of scriptures. 1 Corinthians 4:2, now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. Parable of the talents, Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and increase in number. God loves stewardship. Yeah. And I would say that majority of your time is going to be spent in stewardship. So you're gonna live in stewardship for a long time. And what I know about the stewardship stage is that it is what you do with what you already have that is going to bring the new opportunities. Okay, so it's really important, even if you're an ambitious person and you're like, I want the new stuff, stewardship is still where you need to live, and you still need to do it well with what's in your hands. The interns always ask me, how'd you get on the leadership team? Or how'd you get in your role? And I always tell them the same thing. Like, I took the thing that got put in my hands, I put my head down, and I did the freaking work, and somebody noticed. Like, that's it. Like, I didn't try to get into meetings. I didn't strive towards forcing my way in. I just put my head down and I did the work, and somebody noticed. So when I was leading, or when I was asked to do the comm role, I was leading that team of PMs. Chunks, 2 other leaders, they pulled me into his office and they said, we want you to be the communications director. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. And I don't think they knew what it meant either. But they were like, will you do it? I said, yes. I said, I don't know what it means, but I will do my best. And they said, great, you've got an intern and a small budget. Cool. I took that intern and I took the small budget, and we hired a company to help us start doing social media for Pastor Steven and the church, because we didn't have a social media team. I know Pastor told that story recently, I think, where he said he ran through the offices and was asking, does anyone care about Twitter? I was there for that. And I did not provide a solution at the time. In hindsight, maybe I should have. But I took the intern, we hired the company, this small group of people in Texas, and we worked with them, and I learned everything I possibly could from them. I was not a social media person. I didn't post all the time. I didn't know much. I learned everything that I could. I took my own classes. I studied what they did. I studied pastors' content. And once I reached the point where I was like, I think that we can do this better than they're doing it, that's when I said, okay, here's my presentation on how we could bring this in-house. Here's what it's gonna cost. Here's how I think we can do it better. And because I stewarded the intern and I stewarded the budget as well as I did, they said, great, now you get to go build your team. But I didn't just get a social media team. I had to build it, right? I had to earn the trust and I had to steward what I was given. So Pastor said years ago, he said something to the effect of like, I never asked to go preach anywhere. I waited to be asked, right? And that always stuck with me, and it really is how like I've modeled my work ethic, is like, I'm not gonna ask to be in anything, I'm just gonna do what I do, and I'm gonna do it well, and I'm gonna trust that God's got his hand all over the rest, and he'll provide the opportunity. I think, Tim, you did this with, the youth team. It was you and made Josiah. Yeah, so, and now look at the room, right? Like, he's been given more because he stewarded what he was given initially, right? I'll just touch on like humility. Like, remember I told you I manage hair salons? I used to show up to church the first year that I went to Elevation hungover, literally every Sunday. I was volunteering and I was hungover. But that girl is the girl that I have to sometimes go back to, and I'm like, you're running like this team, you're running this department, and like humility can be hard, guys. Like, but God's in charge. You're not, and I didn't get myself here. God did that. There's no way that I could have planned this. Like, he did it. So I'm just telling you, if you're like worried about what's next, like just remember, Pastor said it this weekend, right? Try higher, take it to God. He'll give you clarity on it. But a couple practical questions on stewardship. What am I doing with what is already in my hands? Where can I add value to my current responsibilities or team? And then what is one action step I can take now towards what I'm believing for next? And that to me ties into what Pastor talked about, do the thing you would do. So if you want to be the creative lead on something, then what would that person do? Or maybe outside of work, you want to give generously, but you're like, I don't have money yet. Like, well, how else can you live generously? Where else can you be generous, right? So I heard a podcast this past weekend. The guy said, be the verb, not the noun. So if you want to be the writer, write. If you want to teach, be the teacher, teach. If you want to be the leader, lead. Like, be the verb, not the noun. I thought that was great. So again, I said this at the beginning, but this is where you're going to spend most of your time. So I think when you start feeling really restless or like you're waiting on God for something new, just go back to these questions. Is there anything else I can be doing with what God's already given me? All right, so we did receive, steward. The last one is release. So for me, release is the hardest one. I don't have a hard time receiving. I'm usually pretty action-oriented. Give me more. But any control freaks in the room? I'm a control freak. You'll relate to this one. But there comes a time when God might ask us to release it. What is it? I don't know. Maybe it's something that you've taken as far as you can take it, and there's somebody else on the team that can do it better now. And you got to be okay with that. Maybe it's a friendship that was only for a certain season. Maybe it's just time for you to give someone else the opportunity to catch. If you want to be a leader, releasing is the thing that you are going to have to get the most comfortable with. The other thing that I always tell the interns is that God can't give you something new if you're clinging so hard to something old. So, you've got your fists. If I've got both fists clenched and I've got them full of all these responsibilities, like, God can't give me anything new. Like, I'm just so holding too tightly to whatever is already in my hands. So let me give you a hypothetical. Like, you're responsible for creating social posts or writing content or managing something, and then Tim says, well, new guy Alex, I don't know why new guy's name is Alex, but it's Alex. Let's call him Alex. So Tim says, now you've been doing this for a year, you're doing a great job, but now I want Alex to do it. It does not matter if you begged to hire Alex. I promise you, you are gonna have some type of struggle of releasing that thing over to Alex. Like, you could have been begging for Alex, you could have been like, I need help, but when it comes time to actually give it to him, there is going to be this like, well, wait a minute, can Alex do it better than me? Did Tim think I was doing a bad job? Why am I giving this to Alex again? Like, you are going to have some type of wrestling with that release. And I just think our ego gets in the way, our identity gets tied to that thing, and it becomes difficult to let it go. I personally have had different levels of this, but I've never gotten fully over it. And I'm a lot older than you, so I don't know. Maybe it's just my thing, but I think there's always, at some level, that you're gonna struggle with release. So I've given you some positive examples of how I've done things right. This one's gonna be a dysfunctional one. And I used to oversee digital, I used to oversee YouTube, I used to oversee all the creative teams, the experience, marketing. Like, there's a lot of things that I've had to release through the years. But 2020, the dark year, I know that 2020 was hard for everyone, so I'm not gonna pretend that I was alone that year. But everything changed, right? Like, COVID hit and everything changed, and everybody's roles had to evolve and adjust. And going into 2020, I was overseeing YouTube. Well, after COVID, YouTube became the most important thing that we were doing because it was how we were reaching the most people, right? So it became the most important thing that we were doing, and then it was like, okay, Che, you're not gonna oversee that, Chad's gonna oversee that. And I was pissed. I was like, I built this freaking thing, what the heck? Like, now that it's important, I don't get to oversee it? But I like spiraled. I was like, I did all those things. Like, does Chunks think I can't handle it? Like what was it? Like, why is it happening? In hindsight, you learn a lot, but like, we had to give it to someone who had more bandwidth. I also was overseeing a lot of things. And someone who could tie it to EFAM and the people that we were reaching, like, he had that connection. So, when it first happened, it was like, what the heck? I can handle this. But like, when I was able to zoom out and be like, oh yeah, this makes a ton of sense. Like, why wouldn't he? Like, he's got the connection to the people on the other side of the screen. It's not about the strategy or whatever. It's like, we gotta find a way to connect with people. But it didn't mean that I didn't have this narrative that I was doing a bad job. Like, it was really hard for me to release it. Recently we shifted, this is not my example, another example, but we recently shifted a lot in creative, right? And I was talking to one of the leaders, and I could tell that he was struggling with some of the changes. And I finally got to the bottom of it, and he's like, well, I just feel like we made all these decisions because I was doing a bad job. And I was like, what? I was like, when did you hear this? I was like, that is not, I said, it's actually the exact opposite. You're the strongest leader that I have, and I need you to develop more leaders. Like, that's the thing I need you to focus on. I need you to focus on the people, not the tasks, not the to-do list. I really need you to lead and develop these people because that's what we need next. And it was like, I could see like a light bulb go off of like, he had created this whole narrative that all of those changes we made were because he did a bad job. And I was like, wow. I was like, no, that's not the case. But I guess I want you to be okay with feeling some of those feelings. I think it's okay, but it is how you process it and getting more familiar with it and being able to almost identify. Now I'm like, when this last creative thing happened, I have the least amount of direct reports I've ever had. It's glorious, y'all. But I just was like, I could feel like a feeling coming, and I was like, oh, that's it. I was like, nope, I'm good, God. Like, I'm good. I don't need that thing. Like, if this is the best thing for it, this is what we're doing. Like, so I've been able to like start to recognize it and then turn quicker, but I think coming familiar of like, okay, how do I feel when that happens? It goes back to receive, right? Like, how am I feeling about this and why am I feeling it? Like, being okay feeling those is okay. Okay, so whether team structure, responsibilities, I've got to stop myself. Remember, releasing something means God has something new. So that's the other thing we talked about, like, or I like had the fist, right? Like, every time I release something, my hand now opens up to receive something new. I really genuinely believe it. I've watched God do it in my life over and over and over again. So even when you might still be going through the pain of like having to let something go or having to release something, just trust that God has something new. I just promise you he does. I've watched so many people in our organization do this over and over again. And it's really awesome too when it finally comes through. You're like, that's the thing I was waiting on. Like that was it. That's why I had to let that thing go, because you had this coming. So a couple questions you can ask yourself around release is there something I may be holding too tightly that God is asking me to release? And then I'll go in more detail. This question doesn't probably make sense because I didn't talk about it yet. But is there an area I could be leading through influence rather than authority? So I may have lost oversight of certain departments, but I don't believe that I've lost influence. So leadership is influence. Authority's from God. Like, authority's from God. So if you're just seeking authority over things, you're not going to be a successful leader in that. So I think remembering that even if you don't have oversight, or you're not a supervisor, or you're not leading a team, like, you still have influence. So figure out how to influence, because I feel like that's the thing that's made me most successful. And I honestly, I was way better at it when we were smaller. It's harder now that we were bigger. But when we were smaller, it was like I knew everybody in every department, and I had relationships with them. And so it was really easy to have influence in all those areas. So you got to work at it. You got to build relationships with different people to do it well. But don't worry so much about authority. Just figure out where you can influence. All right, so receive, steward, release. That's how I've made it. Wins, losses, challenges, distractions, opportunities. I think you're going to keep experiencing this in your life, in your time here, whether you're receiving a new opportunity currently, or you're just in stewardship of what God's given you, or you're in the process of like, I got to release something soon. I just hope that this can be like a check-in for you. Yeah, so let's talk about it. Like, you have questions around this, questions for me just being on staff for 13 years. What can I help you with?
First, love your shirt.
Thank you.
Yep. When you were speaking about receive, you brought up the third question of like, how do I know if this is a problem for me to solve versus like, is this something for somebody else, or am I supposed to just help the person, or am I like hands off? I guess what goes through your mind when you're identifying that? Because I'm also a problem solver by nature. So trying to figure out practically like, how do I determine or identify what is mine to solve or take versus maybe more so helping or being hands off?
I think one thing you can do is like whatever the problem is, who's in charge of it, and like start with that person. Do they even know it's a problem? Like, I think working with the person leading it. Now, if it's your area, then take ownership of it, fix it, bring a solution to your leader. They're going to want you to do that. If it's another area of the church or another department, I try to start with the leader, like, and that doesn't even have to be like, I've seen this problem. Like, it's gonna be like, hey, I just noticed this. What, like, I just want, like, it can be more casual in getting it in front of them. But I think like knowing that maybe it's not just, is it my authority or is it their authority, and give them a chance to do it first before you jump in and solve it for them. But I think if you're like, I can bring a solution to this, and it's my area and my department and my team, like, I think bring that to your leader.
I just wanted to say something on that. I think you do that very well. I think you've done that even with me and this team, where you'll, hey, can I meet with you for 5 minutes? And I'm, first off, I'm always like, oh, Cherish, what's happening? And then go in and say, hey, I noticed this. Do you need any help with it? Or I've noticed this on social media, and I don't want it to become a pattern, and here's some thoughts. But it's never like, you need to get this fixed. What the heck are you doing? You're an idiot. You didn't come up with it, or whatever. Does that make sense? So I think you do that very, very well. And I think that's super helpful, because it's really easy for me to almost, definitely, I'm just speaking for myself. It's easy for me to take things personal quick. And I've just seen you do it super well for me. I'm like, seriously, like 4 or 5 times where I'm like, oh yeah, we do need to get that fixed. And then being able to go to the team, and it almost feel a lot more empowering too, to where I'm not coming down on the team, you know? And so I think just the way that you steward that helps other people steward it within their team. And it doesn't feel like a hammer's coming down, but it feels like, hey, we got solutions, but y'all kind of figure out what the best way to do it. But just to let you know, there is a hole here. So I commend you on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so my question is, I feel like sometimes I'm holding on to something so tightly that I don't even recognize that it's something I need to let go. What would you say are some ways to recognize when I am holding on to something too tightly, and how do I switch my mindset to be able to release that to somebody else?
It's a great question. I don't know if I have a great answer. So you're saying you've recognized that you need to release something, or you haven't recognized?
Yeah, like I'm holding on to it so tightly that I don't even recognize that it's something that I need to let go.
Yeah.
My fault.
No, I'm trying to like think of an example of something that I've, because I'm sure I've done that before. I don't know. I feel like someone will tell you, or God will tell you, you know, like I think at some point, or you'll get so overwhelmed by other things that you'll be like, oh, like I can't do all of this on my own. I need help. And maybe that's ultimately what you're maybe struggling with, is like asking for help, too, of like, yeah, I can't be on an island here, which is just a different, I understand that struggle too, of not being the best at asking for others to help you. But you got a great team and people want to help you. I think that's like, sometimes we do that as a staff all the time. It's like, well, I don't want to burden that person, or the team always they're like, well, I just don't want to put that on them. I was like, don't say no for them. Yeah. Like, that might be the other thing to think about it, is like, maybe you're keeping someone from an opportunity because maybe that helps you release it sooner, if it's feels more of like you're helping the next person own it at a different level. Think about that person, not yourself necessarily. Like, you might actually be holding something back from them.
Yeah, that's really good. That's great.
I even think like maybe asking your leader, am I solving all the problems that you need? And then am I doing everything that you need? Is this the priorities? Is this what you're wanting me to do? Because sometimes that perspective, like that try higher deal, sometimes it is God, but sometimes it's just the next level up and go
Right.
like, does that make sense?
Yeah, you could be spinning your wheels on something that your leader doesn't even necessarily care as much about.
This is a great teaching.
What up, cuz?
What up, cuz? Shout out the Rushes. You talked a lot about feeling being necessary to discern, and when something is a new opportunity from God or potentially a shiny distraction from the enemy. I know in my life, some of the times I've been the most tempted to take a new opportunity, underneath has actually been unresolved conflict. So I didn't know if you could meaning there's just some bad feelings maybe underneath it. Could you just take us maybe deeper into how to wade through feeling? Emotion can be such a subjective thing, and just maybe break it down even more, share from an experience you've had that you waded through that feeling and emotion on how to not take an opportunity or to take an opportunity.
I think everybody is different and everybody processes differently. So let me first say that. I will tell you, for me, I am not I don't like to feel too long. So I like to move past as quickly as possible. I think that there is no substitute for that safe person that you can process that feeling with. And that might be, I'm not married, but I would say not your spouse if it's work related. I think like finding somebody else, whether that's someone you consider a pastor to you or a mentor, it's not your peers. Most of the time they're gonna have a jaded or they'll have a one-sided perspective. I think I have a friend who has worked in ministry for years, and loves our church, but she doesn't work. We don't work together, and she is a safe place for me that I can go and say I'm feeling this, and she's not somebody who's just going to be like, yeah, Che, you have every right. She's going to be like, well, what about this? Like, what? Maybe that person feels this way. She's going to challenge it first, not necessarily just feed into it. So I just think that like you've got to have that person. And I've only honestly recently found her in the last couple of years. Like it took me a while to find somebody like that. But I feel like it's changed the game for me of like having not a peer, not another staff member. It's just like you need somebody who kind of like has an understanding of what you do for living, like for work, for ministry, but cannot, like is just kind of unbiased.
Great teaching, so thank you for being here today. My question would be, when you're in the transition of releasing something for someone else to catch it, what do you do next in that? Do you support them in the thing that you released, or do you just fully let go and like let them have it? Like, what do you do in the middle of that transition?
Again, I think it depends on what the handoff is. If it's something Pastor Steven cares about, I'm probably not going to just hand it off and say, well, yeah, they did it. Sorry. So it depends on what your leader cares about. Like the transition might feel a little bit slower when you're releasing something, but I think there's also times where you got to let people sink or swim. And it's like, no, you got this. I trust you. I've trained you as much as I know how. I've tried to set you up for success, not failure. So you don't want to just give someone something blindly and not try to set them up for success. The whole point of releasing as a leader is for them to be successful. That's leadership. My success is my team's success, right? Like, so you don't want to just like send them to the wolves, but there's certain people who have a harder time just like thinking they're ready. And so sometimes you gotta just tell them you're ready and you're doing it. And they'll learn something through it. If they fail, they fail. But like, I think like pastors talked about that a lot too, of like, it depends on the task, right? At what level you're gonna release it. Like there's some things that you can just be like, go. Other things you might be a little bit slower of a pass off.
I've got a question for you. You had mentioned that there's a tension between an ambitious person and living in the stewardship phase. Mm-hmm. How do you navigate that well? Because I feel like ambition is something you're always going to have at the forefront of your thought, right? Yeah. How do you navigate that stewardship phase well as an ambitious person? And have you seen staff members who do it well? What does that look like for them in those seasons?
Yeah. I think everybody's different. I was telling Tim, I'm like, it's so hard to talk to this room because I feel like everybody's in such a different stage of leadership and where they're at. But, okay, so ambition. I think it still go back to where can I add value to the thing I already am responsible for? Because there is probably something new. There is probably something, and there's going to be times you present something and your leader's like, I don't want you to do that. Like we're not going to put money towards that. We're not going to put energy. That's okay. That's still that process of like going through it. You learn something. So it's not always for you to get the next thing. Sometimes it's just to like show that you still have some drive and you're still willing to push things forward. It doesn't mean that every idea is going to be accepted. So if your leader sees that in you, though, when the opportunity that they need you to do, they're going to come to you because they're like, you provided this solution for this thing. I think you can do this. So I think like go back to the thing that you've been handed and how can you add value. But I also think there's times where there's like, if there's a solution or an idea you have, there's appropriate settings to pitch something to your leader. Like you can, in a one-on-one setting or bring them something and just say, hey, I've been thinking about this. What do you think about it? Before you put a ton of money, a ton of energy into it, you can start planting seeds. I think that's okay. I don't think you're striving at that point, as long as it comes back to like, you're doing it because you really think it's to better the church, better the team. reach more people. Like, as long as your motive is pure and it's not just like, oh, I'm trying to get something out of it, I think that's okay.
Love the practicality of this teaching, really enjoyed that. And as I'm hearing this, thinking about how much of this is rooted in pride and how we've allowed that really to become such a stigmatized word. It's such a bad thing when it's something we all struggle with. I realize that even though there's not always times where I'm in a season of change, it's almost a guarantee that I'm close to someone who is in a season of change on staff here. And so I was just kind of wondering, what have you learned about helping others navigate this? Because there's probably some do's and don'ts for how you can approach that and really support someone. Because with the size of this team now, we are going to have someone in our circle at almost all times who's navigating this.
Yeah. One of the best examples of like when I've done it well, I had someone reach out and they were struggling with something that they knew that I had struggled with like prior. And they were like, how did you navigate this? So I think like being aware of like what you're familiar with, if it's a feeling you're familiar with and you can help somebody else navigate it, that's really helpful. But I think what I did with them was I almost put a timeline on it. So when you talked about feeling, John, like you don't get to feel for 6 months. I worked with them to say like, all right, in 1 month, I'm checking in on you and we're gonna make a decision on this. If you haven't moved past it, we gotta have a different conversation. So I think like forcing people to like put some restraints to it of like, all right, yeah, feel your feels. You got 24 hours. Tomorrow we're talking, like, you know, or whatever it is. Some obviously take longer, but I think like that was it was the thing when I was going through it, putting a timeline on myself that helped me move past something, that then I was able to give them that advice as well. And they came to me and said it was a game changer. So I don't know, it worked for the two of us of just like, no, let's put some parameters to this. Like, how are we gonna get past it? Not, let's just talk about it, but like, how are we gonna move past it?
Okay, I want to piggyback on that a little bit. I love how you said someone reached out to me because they knew it was something I had gone through and struggled with. There are some of us that don't let nobody know nothing we go through. And so, you know, we know that everything we walk through that's hard, God wants us to use it for someone else to make it easier. But then also, whether it's rooted in pride or just gratitude for all the blessing we do have, we don't necessarily let others know what those struggles look like. So in what environments do you let people know, you know, so that they know that you are now a safe place to put up a hand, but then also not become a, you know, roller coaster of the ups and downs every day.
Yeah, for sure. I think Pastor's talked about appropriate vulnerability. Feels like, you know, kind of what you're saying. I think like he has said something, and Tim, you probably know this better than I do, but like about not preaching about something when it's still a wound, only when it's a scar. So I think like you don't have to always talk to your safe person is your person to process, right? Like you don't have to tell everybody as you're going through it. It's after you've gone through it and you've learned something from it, that's when you have something to share. Like it's not while you're going through it. But you need a person, Aaron. I'll be your person. But no, seriously, I think you need someone. You need somebody to process it with, because but I think it's after you've healed from it that's when you share it. That's when you can share it. You don't want to I'm not going to tell my whole team when I'm in the middle of like a breakdown, right? Like that's not good leadership. So I have to process it first and then get to a place where I can share it and teach it.
Hey, this is great. Thank you so much for this teaching. So I'm ADHD, so like my brain has to picture things. And so receiving, it feels like it can be such an individual thing when you can receive an opportunity for somebody, but like stewardship is a team effort. And so the gap oftentimes between like stewardship and release for me is the development side. So I picture it like a rope bridge or like one of those bridges over like a waterfall or something like that. And the gap is development. And on one side of the bridge, like one rope is trust and vulnerability. And the other side is like weight and like what we do and like impact. So it's like personal for me, personal for them, and then the planks are like the influence. And you have to take somebody on that mission. Do you find yourself leaning one side or the other in the process of developing somebody? Do you lead from like trust and vulnerability, like this means something to me, or do you lead more from the place of weight and impact, like this means so much to other people? And how do you keep from getting lost in the process of development so that you can properly release it to that person?
Some deep stuff. Okay, let me try to word this back to you so I make sure I'm answering what you're asking. You're saying, do I lead from a place of trust or vulnerability versus a place of like the thing that we're doing?
Like, I think like the way that I find myself developing is like because it means so much to other people and because it means something, it's like personal. That's how I oftentimes will develop people, but I find like some people lean one way more than the other. How do you personally?
Yeah, I think I get you. I think like I have a lot of self-ownership, so I'm gonna lean on like I'm gonna do this with excellence because I care about it and like it matters to me. And you're saying not everybody is necessarily built that way. Yeah, I don't know. I think like everybody has to have, I mean, it's YLB does your why, right? Like everybody has to have some type of ownership in like why they're doing what they're doing. I don't think it means that you love every aspect of your job all the time. But you still have to have some type of remnant of like, this is why I do what I do. And go back to that. And I think as a leader, you've got to point people back to that. And if they don't have that, then you got to start there. Like, well, if you don't enjoy this, then why are you even here? Like, this might not be the thing for you. Like, and that's okay to have. Like, it just might not be. They might be in the wrong spot, whether that's on staff or in the wrong position. Like, if they can't find a why behind it or get passionate about it. Now, I don't think. Again, I don't want you to take that as like you gotta love every aspect of your job, because I don't think that's true either. There's always going to be parts of your role that don't thrill you, like right? We all have those, but I think at the core of it, everybody has to have a little bit of that. And I think your job is to like get them to see their own, not to push yours onto them. Great. They got to find their own.
All right, I'll end it, and then we want to pray for you. You talked about letting people sink or swim.
Yeah.
And I love that. I tend to do that as well. But what are some ways that you kind of identify if that person can handle being able to sink or swim? It's like, yep, here we go. Rather than it being like, hey, you just got to figure it out because on time issues or anything like that. Because I think for me, I feel like I'm starting to get to that place where I am trying to identify, this person is just not that type of person. I'm gonna have to do it a different way.
Yeah.
What are maybe some practical things that you do, or maybe some questions that you ask to help identify to yourself? Yes, this is a person that can handle sink or swim. No, I need to go a different way about it.
I think the simplest and easiest way to do it is in a one-on-one setting. It's just saying, what would you do? Instead of answering all their questions. Learning how they think, at what level they're thinking about it. So I know we say that a lot, but I don't know that we always do it a lot in that type of setting of like, just go back, if they're asking you or they're like running a plan by you, what holes do you see in it? Do you think this is great? Like, are you good with like, and then if it's like they don't see it yet, now you're correcting I think like getting them to discover what their gaps are is probably the easiest way to just kind of get a feel for each individual. But I'm with you, Tim. It is easier for me to release people that I know are like me and I trained like we have similar. It's very easy for me because I'm like, I know where they're at because I was there. It is harder for me on people that I don't have as much like of a skill set in common with them. It's way harder for me to know like are they ready? And I've gotten it wrong a lot. Like, even on like the hiring front, like I've hired poorly in positions that I didn't have as good of a knowledge of the area, and I didn't bring the right people in. So that might be it too. Like maybe there's somebody else who could help you if it's not somebody who's like similar. Is there somebody else that they work with or have a similar skill set? Like, hey, I want you to go sit with that person. Let them ask them some questions, get a feel for it. Involve another person maybe.